Welcome to the Transfer Nation Videocast and Podcast. Transfer Nation aims to create a network and community of educators who work with and advocate for transfer and post-traditional college students. Our mission is to build community, transform culture, and empower success for transfer educators and students by sharing resources and celebrating all things transfer.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Transfer Nation podcast and videocast. I could not be more excited today for one of our transfer student story episodes. We get to meet transfer Regent Scholar, transfer McNair Scholar, transfer external affairs coordinator, transfer advocate and trailblazer, real all-around transfer superstar. Alexis, it's so good to have you here. Please explain to us your gorgeous name and where it comes from and how to pronounce it properly.
Don't worry, I don't blame you. It takes a little bit of working with. I think my mom still struggles with it sometimes. Okay. Yes, I'm Alexis Atsilvsgi, Zaragoza. And as for that name, right, we were talking about it a little bit earlier. It's in my tribe, right? Because I'm Native. I am Cherokee Nation citizen. I'm also a descendant from Choctaw Nation, and so lots of really cool things about that we'll probably be getting to, as well as also me being Chicana. And so part of some of our traditions, right, which not everybody has anymore, but we definitely still do, is a naming process, traditional naming process, where your grandmother gets to select your name. It can be either at birth, it can be, once you come of age, whatever that might mean for your family. And so mine was coming of age, and she gave me ah-tsee-luh-ski, which means the part of a rose that blooms. It's meant to really represent, of course, the growth, as well as, the root word of that is ah-tsee, which is fire. And so, this idea that fire and nature coexist and help each other, right? We cannot live with only one, even if we call one destructive, right? And so really just the beauty of the elements and how they work together as well. So lots within that name. It was an amazing time when she gave it to me. She gave it to me when I turned 21.
I love it. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. What a beautiful way to honor each other, to honor your granddaughter, and to just pass on that meaningful heritage, and also the meaning to you individually, right? Because that is such an impactful name, right? The yin and yang, as you were saying, and the balance of those two, of the elements of that name. I know everyone gets their own individual name, but that's what's so beautiful and unique about that, is that it's uniquely you. So thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
I think you have an artifact or an item that kind of represents your transfer journey or represents something about transfer to you. And I would love to know what that is and see it, so then we can start talking about your transfer journey.
Yes. So I was thinking about it and I was like, wow, I should get an MJC hoodie. I should get something. But when I was really thinking about it, I was thinking, what really did community college do for me that I think maybe I either didn't get at a 4-year or really impacted me personally. So I'm bringing a book. So this one is the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. This was gifted to me by one of my mentors in community college. His name was Brian Marks, and you can see his writing on the inside as well. It was a note for me. And
that's a lot of writing. That's a long note.
But really, I think the thing that transfer did for me was it made me who I am, right? And I can't separate that from, of course, my love for it, my advocacy for it, but really the journey of sort of, in my mind, failing, right? Not being able to transfer into a school when I came out of high school, and then rediscovering my love of learning in the process of going to community college, as well as discovering myself, right? Noting my flaws, the things that were, potentially holding me back, and becoming who I am today, which I think is this completely different person than I was years ago, right? still has the same amount of like passion, but knows how to use it, right? One of those things. And so when I think about my community college journey and transfer, I think about the growth that I've gone through, and all the things that I've learned, and just how that's made me my person.
When you read that book, what resonates with you the most? Why should someone else pick up that book right now?
I think for me, it's just always continually working on ourselves. Like I know, I think part of the reason he gave it to me, right, is because over the years he watched me transform right in front of him, right? I was definitely this girl who thought she knew everything and had all of these huge things that she wanted to do, right? But had no actual means of being able to do them because she was so caught up in herself, right? Things like that. That's what I think about when it was me years before. But it's about questioning your intentionality. It's about questioning, the values that you hold. Really asking, like, am I doing this for the right reasons, right? Am I doing this to make up for something? Am I doing this because I want to impress, my family, or am I doing this for me? Like, and at what point am I going to start doing this for me? And so for me personally, right, this whole college journey, and I'm still going through it today, right? Am I on the right path? Am I doing this for the right reasons, et cetera? And I think now I'm getting closer and closer to the answer of yes. Yes, I am doing it for the right reasons.
I want to know a little bit about what inspired transfer, right? You mentioned it a little bit in your opening and your connection to the book, but Modesto Community College to UC Berkeley. What inspired that journey? How did you get there? And then we'll dig into a little bit of what happened at your community college and your 4-year as a transfer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing is that I knew I had always wanted to go to college, right? And I think, again, I was just kind of too caught up in myself and doing things, and I was very much a doer in some areas, right? But I wasn't doing everywhere. So in high school, right, I was the overachiever. I was in all these AP classes and everything else, but yet I was not doing well in those classes. I was our, school president, but I wasn't actually doing well in school, right? Things like that. I was so caught up in, I want to do this, and it's fine. Somebody will accept me. It's okay. And so I actually had originally received a admittance to Humboldt, and I was super excited, right? So I love that area up there, and that's kind of what I was going to do. I think I was going to go study global studies or something like that. And that was just because I wanted to travel. I had no idea what I was doing. And so, but then a couple months later, right, I had failed one of my math classes, and I was hoping to make it up the next semester, but it was just not going to happen. And so Humboldt ended up revoking their admittance for me. And I was just really crushed. I didn't know what to do. And my thought process was, okay, I'll go for 1 year at community college, then I'll transfer somewhere, right? All these different things. But that whole time I didn't know what I wanted, right? I had no idea. And so coming into Modesto Junior College, right, I remember coming in very bitter, I think, feeling, oh, I shouldn't be here. I should have been at Humboldt. I'm a failure, all these kinds of things going through my head. And then that's when things really started to change for me, though, is, being in those classes, it's like all of a sudden, like a light switch was turned on where I was like, wait, I really like these classes. I really like doing these things. I took like an intro to political science course, and I was like, I love talking and having opinions. So, like that kind of thing was really cool for me. There's also a mixture of also, I think, being a woman in those classes that definitely pushed me a lot. I was definitely always the very, very angry that I couldn't articulate what my opinions were in those classes. So it was, very big about that. So all of a sudden I was in the library every single day. Wait, I need to know everything about this specific topic because we're talking about it, and I don't feel smart enough to talk about it. So let me go read these books on it. And all of a sudden I just became this maniac for reading and writing and learning. But while that was happening, right, that's when I had gotten into a student government over there. But student government, I would say at Modesto Junior College is very different from a lot of other schools in the system. It's very focused on personal growth. It's very focused on leadership, right? And that's something that I wasn't expecting. And I think I was very resistant to that at first. I wanted to be doing political things. That's what I thought student government was. Little did I know that, of course, that aspect was going to transform who I was forever, right? And totally change my trajectory to, coming from this person who was like, oh, I'll be here a semester and transfer back to Humboldt, to realizing that first, second semester, wait a minute, the world is full of possibilities now. Like, I don't have to be stuck to one binary path. I have all these options. Let me explore them while simultaneously growing as a person. So that's really kind of where that all started. And I think, going along the pathway further, it was just one thing after another, one domino piece after another, got to where I'm at today.
Well, and it sounds like there were some mentors or some faculty that also inspired that, whether it was the exposure in the classroom to new ideas and thoughts that you either agreed with or didn't agree with, but you weren't quite sure how to articulate your opinion, and you wanted to dig farther. And so whether that was a good professor or not, you were inspired and you were engaged in that. Were there people that you looked to, mentors or faculty or other students who were instrumental in that exploration and self-discovery?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, MJC was so full of people. Like, I could, like, if I put out a first book, I would have pages and pages of acknowledgments just from MJC, right? Because I think that was such a huge part of who I am and how that all happened. But at the top of the list, right, that would be, mostly student government people, right? Because again, it was more than just, okay, we're putting on this event. Okay, we're going to be in this meeting, right? It went so far beyond that, right? To transforming friendships and how I saw people. I would describe myself as, at least a couple of years ago, very disconnected from people. I didn't know how to keep friends in a way. I just saw everyone as acquaintances, and I didn't feel like getting close to people. I was so different.
That surprises me so much, because you're so warm and you're so easy to connect with. So that does surprise me. So interesting.
Very.
And I want to just pause for a second to nerd out with you about community college, because I think this is an aspect that maybe is misunderstood, but there is such a rich culture of engagement and involvement and advocacy. And it can be in student government, it can be in other focuses and areas. But the richness of the people and the engagement is so real.
Absolutely, exactly. And so, and again, I could write so many names. Whereas I think when I think about the UC system, right, which of course I love it, I'm here, I'm representing, right, which is amazing. But I definitely don't have as many of those people here. And I think that, it's almost like there's a ton of quality, impactful programs, all these different things that I can take advantage of here that I didn't have at community college. But I think, the people are slightly more disconnected over here, whereas transfer and community colleges are just so tight knit because we have to be, right? It's almost like a means of survival over there. But out of that means for survival comes so much love and compassion from the people that we work with. So, I think of when you're mentioning mentors, right? I'm thinking, Brian and Ale from MJC's ASMJC office, right, who inspired me. John is another one who inspired me, right? I'm thinking of all these people. I'm thinking of even higher up, right, once I got onto the Board of Governors, meeting Daisy Gonzalez, who is amazing. I'm sure you've heard of her in some capacity, right? She's just incredible. And I'm so lucky to call her a mentor, right? But also even just instances, like moments during my college career in community college, right? When I think back to my first meeting, right? You think about how many meetings I'm in now, right? But my first academic senate meeting, where I was there as a student representative, it was my first time being in a big person meeting, right? And how grateful I am that the woman next to me noticed how on the side of my paper, I was writing down words that I didn't understand and acronyms that I didn't understand. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to research this later. And she just started writing them right there on my paper, explaining it to me very quietly, right? And I just I think about her, and I think about these people who, in meetings, who noticed that I was there, and if I was too quiet for too long would say, what does our student have to say about that, right? And that really showed me the power of student voices, and in a way that I didn't even know was as big of a deal when I was in the middle of it, but then later on have become a huge advocate for that same thing happening all across our system.
That's amazing. Those moments, those inspirations that happen just because people notice and people have a shared experience and they care about one another and they're lifting one another up. I love that. I love that moment when she was writing those acronyms down for you, or those definitions. That's beautiful. What a beautiful, well, so thank you to that woman out there, because that just like completely brought me to tears, and thinking of the givingness and the camaraderie and engagement that people really do find at community college. And hopefully you're finding it other places in your life as well, but it's the love letter to community college that we're talking about today. So
absolutely.
So so obviously your student government and your political self is blooming and finding its avenue and its voice and its table and its meetings. What other identities are important to you at this point? Were there other things in the community college experience that you started to connect with, or you started to really sort of find were vital to you and important to you?
Right. Yeah. And I think, some of the, I guess, identities that I hold, of course, have a huge impact on me, right? Being Native, also being Hispanic, right? Which I think actually that last part has a lot to do with Berkeley too. Just my father, he came here to the United States when he was 12, right? And he loved Berkeley. And I actually, I talk about this sometimes where I almost had a vengeance against Berkeley, but this is why. Because my dad loved it so much. He loved it so much. He would bring us here. There used to be a crepe place down here. I don't know where it is anymore, or if it's even still here. But he would bring us here, and he would always say, "I want one of my kids to go to Berkeley." And obviously, growing up, I was like, "It's gonna be me. I gotta be that person, right?" And then when I didn't even make it into Humboldt, right? I think that's when I was like, that was supposed to be almost like a guaranteed pathway for me out of high school. I thought that there was nobody that could take that away from me. I was like, hey, I thought I had a minimum GPA, et cetera, but I didn't finish the criteria. And so, even having that taken away from me, I think I grew to be almost, Berkeley isn't even that great, et cetera, et cetera. I started to get into that mindset. And so, coming into, when I was transferring, for one, I almost didn't even apply to Berkeley. And a part of that was because, honestly, just money. I wanted to I was for sure tagging to Davis. I was like, I think I'll go to Davis if anything. And then I had applied to Stanford, right? And I was like, mainly because they have one faculty member. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to work with them. That was pretty much the only reason for Stanford. But then on the last day, it's like I was filled with like this regret, like I should have applied. But I didn't have the money for it at the time. So I remember I was sitting in the school library, the MJC library, and a girl who's now my best friend, right? It was hearing me talk about, oh, I feel so bad, but I also don't have the money for it, et cetera. And she was like, I will transfer you the money right now, and you can just pay back when you get your next paycheck or something. Like,
what?
Yeah.
Oh my God, this woman's amazing. You have amazing women in your life. That's so cool.
So many amazing women in my life.
So she just said, enough, like, here's the money, do it.
Yes, exactly. And it was the last day, the day right before, and she just sent it over to me. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I ended up applying to Berkeley. And it was funny because I had gotten waitlisted for Stanford, right? Which is actually pretty crazy considering they only accept like 20 students for transfers, right? Which
it's like 13 or something. It's like, I think it's even less. Yeah.
I'm like, Stanford, we got to talk.
Yeah. Hey, Stanford, if you want to do a podcast episode, I have a lot to say about it.
But, I'd gotten onto the wait list, and I was like, oh, this is cool, but I'm really happy with Davis. And it was interesting because when the Berkeley decisions came out, I remember I was sitting in my room and I got the acceptance, and I was just sitting there for a while, and I just remember out of nowhere, I just started crying. And my mom walked in, she was like, what's going on? And I was like, I got into Berkeley. And she was like, well, that's really good, but why are you crying? Like, that's not your number one school, right? And I think it was just all this pent up emotion of where, like, thinking that I wasn't good enough and putting that onto the school and then finally like feeling like, wait a minute, like I think I have wanted to go here, but I've been suppressing that, right? And so just like I was caught up in this idea, I'm not gonna get in. So why even hope for it, etc. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting thing even getting here. But of course, my father, of course, being an immigrant and also all these different things that entail our identities, but also me being like super mixed, right? All these kinds of intersectional identities within me have also impacted my journey in that interesting way, right? And also just balancing, what are my parents' dreams, but also what are mine. And I think, obviously, even though that was a part of my dad's dream, and now I'm fulfilling that. I think that Berkeley was absolutely the right move. I love it here so much more than I ever thought I would, especially before getting in, right? And obviously it's led to all these amazing opportunities, right? I wouldn't have had otherwise. And so I am absolutely on the right path. And I think that just is speaking to this idea that everything happens for a reason. That's what's been happening in my case. And I'm an absolute advocate for that way of thinking because that's been my life pretty much. So
well, I really want to get into the transfer experience at Berkeley, but I'm curious, does your dad come to visit you every single day now at Berkeley? So did your dad freak out? Did he cry when he found out you got in? What was that reaction?
Yes, it was definitely really crazy. I think he knew that I was going to get in though, because I had mentioned that. I think that he knew.
That's why he was saying from the very beginning.
Right. But yes, he definitely comes through a lot, right? He's definitely here all the time. He actually has worked on this campus before, and that's kind of how he got around. He was a carpenter, and so he's like made some of the offices and random things like that on different college campuses all across California. And that he loves Berkeley. He loves Berkeley so much, and so I'm glad that he can be my papa bear. And
So I want to hear about being a transfer at UC Berkeley. I'm curious, just the nuts and bolts of the transfer process. It sounds like you had folks at MCC, Modesto Community College, or Modesto Junior College, or Community College, Junior College. So it sounds like you had folks there saying, here's how to transfer, here's where, guiding you a little bit, or maybe giving some of that inspiration and direction about what could happen next? Or was that something you carved out on your own, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, so I think that there is definitely a lot of work that still needs to get done in this area. And I think that there's been a lot of work happening on the community college side around transfer. And now we're looking at the UC. It's like, hey, are you going to catch up anytime soon? That's also why I love doing the work here, right? Is because it feels as if I'm working in a system that also needs to relearn this again, right? And so I think obviously there's a lot that's always happened with the community colleges, right? Like creating singular pathways, et cetera. Or here, there's a lot of problems, right? And a lot of that just has to do with the schools not necessarily being made for us. And that even goes down to, when I was applying for this position, right? And being on the Board of Regents. Transfers can't really apply. The only reason I was able to apply is because I knew I was taking an extra year. Because I like things in threes, right? 3 years of community college, 3 years here. Apparently I wanted at least that. And so I knew I was going to do that because I'm a double major. I figured I would stay at least an extra semester. But then, of course, especially when the pandemic first hit, I was like, oh yeah, there's no doubt I'm taking an extra semester. Kind of finish up the experience. And so I knew that was going to happen, but most students, if you're just doing 2 years, you don't qualify to be in this position, right? And that's the truth across not just this position, but many positions, many pieces. Like when you're going into student government over here, extremely difficult. You can't run for president. You've only been here for a year. Like these different stigmas, right, that surround us. And it even for me, I think it was I don't remember if it was Ava Oakley or might have been Devon Graves. I'm like, I've known so many great people at this point who've given me advice. But I know I went to both of them when I was looking at applying for the Student Regent. And I remember being told that 1/3 of the system's transfers. And there has never been there has been, Jamal is a transfer student, but of course it had been a while, right? He's a PhD student. That's the only reason that he was really able to. Unless, had he tried to do it when he first transferred, I don't think it would have happened. And so, they were saying, I was over here like, oh my gosh, I haven't been here long enough. They don't, I'm not going to be a good representative. And they were just telling me a third of students feel that same way about every single opportunity that they're being given, about everything that's in front of them, right? I'm not good enough because I haven't been here long enough. But a third of students are not having their story told on this level. And so for me, that was really the push that I needed to really apply and try to go for it. And of course, I was able to get it, which is really amazing. And it's been really great so far. But, I think when it comes down to, different research programs, a lot of it is based off of your first semester GPA. Not a lot of regular students know that we come in with 0.0s. We have to work from the ground up for our GPA, even though we, I maintained a 4.0 almost. I think it was like 3.989 or something when I finally came from MJC, right, down to a 0.0. And we know, right, which is something I learned in BORS and the Board of Admissions, that the first semester is the student's hardest semester. It is the semester that they are going to do the worst in. And so as transfer students, we have this huge weight where we have to transfer in, get used to the cost of living, get used to all these different things and changes, middle of everything that we're doing, find jobs for the next summer, find research opportunities, find work study jobs, all these different things while getting used to a new campus. And at the same time, right, we have to somehow get a 4.0 during our first semester if we're going to be eligible for any of those opportunities. It's not possible. I've seen some people be able to do it, but most of the people that ended up getting those opportunities had actually been here for like 3 semesters already, but they had done it part-time to get used to it, or, they had to do other things to make it that way. And so, I think that there's just huge inequalities already built into the system where we have to adhere to all of these very interesting rules. And I remember bringing that problem to somebody and they were like, oh no, you should be thankful because, you come in with a clean slate. And do you know how many freshmen would love to come in with a clean slate during their junior year? And I was like, no, not at all.
I worked my tail off for that. I worked my tail off for that.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I have nothing to weigh me up, right?
Yeah. I'm so glad that you went for it. And because it's vital, you're talking about these 2-year contracts, these structures that are in place that a transfer would not know, would not ever be able to know about unless they spent that extra year, had someone ahead of time, explain it to them. But even then, you're having to navigate these hurdles that are put up for you. And unless you have someone who is a transfer student who sees it and points it out. And even then, like you said, sometimes there's a lot of excuses or there's a lot of like, well, that's the way because of this and this and this. And so you're able to, from the inside out, really change and shift, transform culture. So if you could just go back a little bit and explain Regent and and Board of Governors and what how I'm not sure students, I should say, I had no idea just how much impact those roles and that student voice role has in the in the system, on things that you're spending money on in the system. So maybe explain a little bit of that, because I would love to learn. And I know as a student, I knew nothing about it. I thought that sounds like a cool, fancy title, but what does that do? What does that role do?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, it was interesting because I didn't know either. And especially in community college, I had no idea what I was getting into with the Board of Governors. I had no clue. And so that's one thing that was kind of funny, is of course, just going back to that, right? Because of course the student government that I was in was very focused on growth, like I said before. And so we never, because the way that the community college is structured, it's actually a really cool structure where the student governments each have regions across the state, Central Valley, up north, etc. And they each then choose a board of directors, so 2 people to bring up to the main board of directors who oversee the whole state for students, right? We have the whole structure. And I had always I was like, oh, we should go to those meetings. Oh, we should do that. And our mentors were just like, let's keep growing first. Like, we need to focus on ourselves, that kind of thing. And so I remember I had been looking at the SSCCC, which is the student government for the community colleges, right, for the whole system wide. I was looking at that Facebook page because I was just curious. It was one of my things that I was doing on one of my days that I was working. And I had seen a flyer for the Board of Governors and needing a student position on this board. And I read a little bit into it and I was like, that sounds really cool. And at that point in time, I was on the Pathways Committee for MJC. I had been a student rep on Academic Senate. So I was very involved in those things. I was also very angry about AB 705, not in a bad way. It's a great thing. But I wanted our colleges to be more inclusive of students in it. Our college personally had not had any students on the committee. It was a closed committee. You couldn't even see what they were talking about. And for something that was so huge, right? I was like, what if this is happening at other colleges? And, also at the time, right, I had been giving, as we get little teams in student government, I'd been giving my team, different publications. So Campaign for College Opportunity, The Transfer Maze was one of the first things that I had read about the community college system. I assigned it to them. And then I found the Vision for Success. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool because it's talking about these things. I didn't even know that the Vision for Success was like Board of Governors related, anything. All I knew was that Board of Governors was some board that needed a student rep that was apparently focused on a lot of things that I liked. And I was like, I'll apply, sure. I think it was the last day to apply to. And I just really quickly put together an application, submitted it. This random student from a random school in the Valley, didn't know anybody in student government up there. And I just turned it in. And, about 5 interviews with the governor's office later, and I was being appointed. And I was like, oh, okay. And I think over that amount of time, I had realized how much of a bigger deal it was, right? But I literally didn't know. I was like, wow, this sounds really cool. I would love to speak my mind on these issues, right? That was it. That's where it came from.
I love it, but that's sometimes what you have to do is you dive in, you find something that piques your interest, that grabs you, that resonates with you, and you go, all right, we'll try this out. And you found a really incredible role for yourself, and also clearly something that you are supposed to be doing. You're such a great advocate on all of these, whatever these leadership positions that you've been talking about are, you have found your way to connect with people in a truly meaningful way, and that is affecting change every day. I watch it, and I'm seeing you do it as we speak in the last couple of years. I really would love to also, though, hear from you. What would you say to those advocates out there, those students who are at community college or who just transferred? What would be your advice or your inspiration or your call to action for student advocates on transfer at the moment?
Absolutely. So just as a general tip to, prospective transfer students and students in general, I think for one, it's just, I cannot stress enough how amazing community college is, especially for just having a clean slate, right? Because I know for me, high school was really difficult, and it's so beautiful. I've actually, over this past semester, I've been helping our neighbor back from town in going to community college. Took a year off, was working, and finally I convinced him, you should take at least a semester, right? Just to try it out. And, of course, the general school advice is, of course, follow this specific pathway because you want them to graduate next semester. For students who are just on the edge, you're not sure if they even want to start school, I'm like, just circle all the classes that sound interesting, and I'll get you some of those classes. And I want you to understand how education feels when it's actually your interests, when it's what you want to be learning, right? And I think that really flips a switch and makes a huge difference. And so, just really pushing people to just try it out, right? It's free in California for it, well, now everybody, right? And so it's, just try it out. Try a semester, try a couple classes. And of course, if at that point they don't want to, then that's okay. But everyone has different paths. But, I think a lot of people can benefit from exploring your interests in that way. And of course, for students, I know a lot of students during the pandemic, of course, are also, very, they're kind of experiencing, oh, should I go here? Should I go there? And really just community college gave me space to grow. I think that was a huge part. I didn't have these crazy expectations, right? I had space to do whatever I wanted to do on this huge spectrum, right? And I decided to go and do all these different things, but like, for a lot of students, you can try out every class, you can try out so many different amazing opportunities. And so I think it's great for students to just do that. You don't always have to stick to a super set path. You can explore. I think that's really the big part. Is community college is also for exploring. As long as you're getting your main things done at some point, whether that take a couple extra years or not, right? Of course, we want to aim toward 2, but if it gets to a little bit more, it's okay as long as you're finding what you love. That is what we need. And as for community college advocates and transfer advocates, I think the biggest thing is just remembering who you are in a space, right? When we're in meetings with faculty and staff, and this is why it's going to pivot toward that question, of course, too, is as student advocates, we are literally the most expert you can get in a room. Even if you're among people with PhDs, even if you're among people who have been working there for a while, nobody else is getting that immediate experience of this is what I'm dealing with than you, right? And it's a really cool thing because we're both almost like the guinea pigs, but the guinea pigs who can talk back and say, wait, this isn't working for me. We have this power. And so, of course, it can be really difficult in these spaces to make space for yourself, especially if that's not being made for you by faculty and staff. But just remembering the power in who you are, because we are the most important voice in the room, no matter what subject it is, because we are the ones who are being impacted. If our colleges are student-centered, then guess what? The center is us. And so speak your mind, right? And then, of course, just pivoting to that faculty and staff question, same coin flip, is making space for those students. Like I said before, I mean, just this very simple things that kept me in student advocacy, that made me a better student advocate, were not having to go back and research that 50 plus list of acronyms and everything else, right? And that actually led to me making an entire master list of acronyms so that other students would understand them, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is confusing. And then, of course, faculty just turning and looking at me and saying, hey, what do you think about this? Or even coming to me after a meeting, if I was particularly quiet that meeting, saying, is there anything else that you want to talk on? Because sometimes I would walk away from a meeting and feel like, it's like they didn't ask the right questions. They didn't ask this. And I felt like I was still holding a lot of my opinions in. And so them coming and saying, hey, like, do you want to do this? Or do you think that maybe we would benefit from, taking these ideas to a student focus group, maybe having a lunch with students, right? It's just doing those little things. And that's what student-centered is, right? It's not just saying it and not having a student in the room, or having a student in the room that you're not really looking at or talking to or making sure is comfortable, right? And so we need to do these things as faculty and staff. These things need to happen in order for us to have a good environment. And like I say this quite a bit, and I'll be bringing it up definitely in the next Regents meeting, because we're talking about tuition, right? It's just that we should be partners, if anything, right? I mean, of course, administration is not a terrible place, right? But of course, there's a lot that's happening. And so faculty are always looking to us when they need help, right? But for some reason, sometimes when we need help, faculty are not there to help. And so just making sure that that's a cohesive relationship can be so beneficial for both sides, right? Because, it's almost like when you have my back, I'll have yours, that kind of thing when it comes to these issues. But if you're going to ignore me for my half, then what is this? And so just having that relationship and viewing that relationship as more so equals than anything is very powerful, and something that every faculty member can do right now.
So powerful and so true. So last, just to end, and I cannot wait to see the rest of your journey from JC to PhD, because I know that you have goals on that end. And so we're going to be reading your research and hearing from you for a long, long time. What do you want to see? What's next generation transfer to you? What is the next, you said you're about to go into some tuition meetings, some budget meetings. If the Bidens are listening to this, what's next for transfer, nationally, even beyond California, because you're in a lot of those rooms and those meetings and you're hearing the conversations. What do you want to see on the forefront of transfer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that just in California, there's a couple specific things, right? Like, we still have issues where, I'll be in political science, right? And I'm trying to apply to UC San Diego and UC Berkeley, but yet they have two completely different requirements, right? Singular pathway is such a huge deal. So that's why I also want to uplift AB 928 this year, right? That's going to help fix that problem. But also it's just, I think financially is such a huge part of transfer, and people don't give it enough credit. And if they do give it enough credit, they're saying, "Oh yeah, we need to fix that," but like no one's really doing the work behind it. And so I think one huge model is Calgrant, the new Calgrant, right, which we haven't been able to pass yet, but are attempting to every year now. Really trying to do this work. It's making sure that at the community college level, you have some form of financial assistance to live, not just for tuition, because we know that's not the main thing you have to pay for. Main thing you have to pay for is yourself and cost of living. So having a cost of living attendance for community college students is such a huge thing in California, but also looking into transferring, and at the UC, for example, one big thing is even summer Calgrant, right? If you're in community college, you have 2 years to get it right, and you want to take a summer, for some reason, summer doesn't count. Okay, like you can't get financial aid for summer. So that part can really hurt transfers. It can also be harmful in that I think a lot of our colleges don't really emphasize that you only get Calgrant for X amount of years. So don't take it up in community college, right? For some reason, that is not a widely known thing, and it ruins students, ruins them. And so trying to emphasize to counselors and professors too, because professors have a lot of game in this. You have a whole day, the first day of the semester, to set something straight with your students, right? The only reason I joined the research program at MJC, which had like 5 students in it out of the entire school, is because one professor one day, first day of classes, was like, "Oh, by the way, this is a thing." And I was like, I've never heard of this, right? Professors have so much part in this, so where you have the most powerful voice that first day of class and letting students know these resources. That's a lot of it. But I think financially, right, upping the cost of attendance, doubling Pell, all these different financial efforts that are happening, even if they also impact, of course, regular 4-year students who come from high school, are all huge things. Because the thing is, as a transfer student, you typically come in with more debt because you didn't have a cost of living adjustment. You come in with a lot more financial neediness, right? I'm over here at Berkeley and I have health insurance I got to pay for. I have car insurance. I have a car payment. That's not in the cost of living. It's not in there. And so I have to come out with a way to pay for all that myself, right? All these issues. And I think so many of the issues at the core can be fixed with financial aid. That's just the straight up truth of it. Everything. Even when you think about, schools are like, we need to increase tuition. I'm like, if you just increased financial aid a lot, then students wouldn't be resistant to you increasing tuition. Students wouldn't be resistant to all these things. And guess what? Then you have more for faculty. Faculty wouldn't have as many problems with payment for their work. It's like you would fix everything if you just fix financial aid. So I think that's the big picture for me, is fixing financial aid, making college accessible for students, and fixing these pathways as well.
It was such a joy to get to connect with you. I've been observing your work and so impressed at all that you've been able to accomplish. And so thank you for spending a little time and sharing your transfer journey and inspirations with Transfer Nation today.
Thank you so much for listening. To continue the transfer conversation, be sure to join the Transfer Nation Facebook group at tinyurl.com/wearetransfernation. You can also follow us on Instagram at wearetransfernation and on Twitter at transferpride. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at tinyurl.com/tnationtube. If you have ideas for future episodes of the Transfer Nation videocast and podcast, please email us at wearetransfernation@gmail.com. We can't wait to continue celebrating all things transfer with you. And as always, in Transfer Pride.